When they see us is the heartbreaking true story of the Central Park Five and the disgraceful miscarriage of justice that they suffered at the hands of a really awful, devastating failure in the criminal justice system. I'm Rob Licuria, senior editor at Gold Derby, and I'm here today with the show's star Jharrel Jerome, who plays Korey Wise, who served years in prison for a crime that he didn't commit. Jharrel, Korey's story is so difficult to watch because of the circumstances of how he became involved in this and what he went through. What did it mean to you to bring his story to life?
It meant the world to me. I mean, it made me realize that this is more than acting. This is more than just a performance. For me, it was more than me. You know, this entire story is way bigger than me, way bigger than anybody who created it, way bigger than my career. So the responsibility and the pressure was so heavy, and I wanted to make sure that I did it justice, especially after meeting Korey Wise himself. I knew that it was important to tell his story, and if I was going to be the one person on this planet to tell his story, I had to make sure that I did it right. And yeah, absolutely, it's definitely so important, and I'm truly blessed to be a part of this.
What did you know about the case beforehand, and what did you then need to do to prepare for the role?
I didn't know the story in depth too well. I grew up in the Bronx, so I grew up very close to Harlem, and I grew up around the same sort of environment and the same sort of pressure that those boys also had. And so growing up for me, I want to say that the story was was told in my household at some point, maybe when I was a young kid, almost as a lesson, a story among other stories where my family's teaching the simple lesson to kids, like, you know, be polite to the police officers and nod and you know, don't reach for your wallet aggressively or anything like that. And so I'd like to say I did hear of it growing up, but no, it wasn't in my head too well until Ava brought it to the surface and Ava brought it to life. And that's where I learned everything about it in detail.
You know, I hear a lot from people who have watched the show or tried to watch the show that a lot of people have found it very difficult to even get into, especially if you're from an African-American background, because it's something that you have to live with day in, day out. And it's a reminder of the systemic issues that you face daily. And I'm wondering if that's the feedback that you've been getting from colleagues, family, and friends, that it was just a devastating thing to watch.
Absolutely. My mom, for example, probably can't watch it again. She saw it once and she called me right away, and she was crying for the first 10 minutes of the phone call. And she said, can I just, you know, cry for a while? And so that kind of impact that was left on her, especially because, you know, I'm her son, and seeing her own child go through that experience, she would never want me to go through any of the pain that she saw me go through on screen. And I'm sure that correlates to families and mothers all over the world, fathers all over the world who just fear the idea that their kid's life may be taken away in a second just by a simple police stop, just by a simple stop and frisk is what they call it and all. So yeah, I definitely think that it's a heavy burden to watch this show, and to know that it's still going on today. That's the terrifying part. This was 1989. It's 2019, and this, I like to call it the Central Park Million sometimes, because this is for countless men and women, Black, Latino, who go through this every day. And so it's a story for them as well as the five. And of course, we focus on the five, but they are proud to also tell their own story for those men and women.
Yeah, I mean, you've touched on this, but with events like Charlottesville and the almost daily police shootings that we hear about, the series seems to be more relevant against the backdrop of those events, even more so than perhaps what it was in the late 80s. How do you feel about how the series is about a moment in time, but it's absolutely an eye-opener about what is absolutely happening now?
I think that's the beauty and why we did the project, and why Ava got this project together. Art imitates life, you know. Art can be medicine if we allow it to be. We can allow our talents and the skills that we have to become something more than just the talent and the skill. We can turn it into a voice that can spark change. And so doing projects like When They See Us and other projects that Ava has done in the past, like 13th and Selma, bringing that realization, it's like, wow, wait, this is actually today, this was then, this will probably be in 30 years as well, unless we start to really do something and change it. And I don't think there's been a time in history where you would see so many films back to back all the time speaking on these issues and finally talking about it. It's like we've been afraid to in terms of the industry. And now that we are, maybe viewers and audience members who are in love with movies, who are in love with music, who are in love with all these different outlets that, you know, we as artists can have a voice to speak on, maybe we can start to collectively get together and start to do things. And that's why art is so much more important than, to me, anything.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, maybe to that mind, we may even see stories about Trayvon Martin and Eric Garner and Ferguson, and you know, those stories are just as valid, and hopefully we'll see them.
And those stories are like the Central Park Five, where we kind of know what happened. We know based off of the media coverage what happened, but until somebody digs deep and finds that true story and finds the heart in the story, because there's always heart in those stories. Hopefully a person like Ava, hopefully Ava has inspired the next writer, the next director to put these stories together and make them happen, so the world can not only see what happened to Trayvon Martin through the brief media coverage he had for about a year, and we can see everything, you know, and start to feel that way towards every story we see. You know, every time we see something in the media, every time we see something on the news, we should be curious as to who they are more than what these news reporters are speaking on them. And we are quick to judge. I'm quick to judge, and I am a victim of that. And I want to get better at not quickly saying, "Oh yeah, no, for sure he did that or she did that," and think, who are they? Where do they come from? You know.
What really struck me, especially from episode 1, was how the show is so brave. It doesn't shy away from, for example, showing real footage of Donald Trump, for example, and the awful things that he was saying in the media at the time, which unfortunately he's still saying. He's now the president of the United States. It's so bizarre to see that progression. What are your thoughts on the political climate these days and how it's probably not really helping the situation at all?
In terms of Trump and all, for us, the story and the reason we made the project was not at all about him or for him. And Ava stresses that to the maximum, to where it wasn't a stab or it wasn't a attack. It's simply factual. It's simply what is there and what has happened, and it's part of the story. And it's not an element of the story that you can gloss over. Yes, especially in today's world where he is president. But however the world is going to react to it is how they will react to it. But it isn't because someone attacked him or someone threw shade at him. It's because there was a time, you know, in history that hasn't been known in terms of Trump. You know, we didn't know that he said that in 1989. We didn't know that he was involved in 1989. Now we know. So however the world will receive that is how they will receive it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's drill down into the episodes themselves. You're playing a real life character, and that whenever I speak to actors who are doing that, especially a person who is still alive, they always explain about how there's extra challenges there to bring an authenticity to somebody that we can just see in the media. What was it like for you to play Korey, given that he is still alive and kind of a known figure?
Yeah, a known figure now, especially.
Yeah.
But there's as an actor, the fun in it almost is that you're creating a character. You know, you're building this false world, you're building this imaginary world for the audience, to where they can relate, to where they can feel like, oh yeah, I can be in that situation. But it's all created and it's all false, and it all comes from your imagination pretty much. But when you're playing somebody in real life, it's not your imagination. You know, it's real life, and you're starting to dive into a real person. It's not a character. You know, that comes with a lot of responsibility. More than anything, that comes with I don't want to say pressure, because pressure sounds negative, but it comes with a lot of responsibility. It comes with the fact that, you know, you have to work extra hard to tell this story, that you are not creating it by yourself, that you're not coming up with your own ideas, that you have to do justice for whoever you're playing, whether they are deceased or alive. And then when they're, you know, when he's right in front of me and I'm looking at Korey and you know, I'm talking to him and we're walking in Harlem and we're hanging out, I'm just building so much love for him and so much love for who he is, and he's inspiring me every day. And so I owe it to him. I owe it to him to show the world that he does inspire, that he can inspire people, and that his story is about strength and power and might over all that brutality, over all the sadness and the anger and the resentment that we feel. It was a story of his battle that he won. You know, it was a story of his journey, and that's exactly how he describes it. He describes the show as, I forgot word for word what he said, but he describes it as the celebration of his life. That's what he calls it. So it's not the pain, and it's not that. It's just celebrating his life and celebrating how far he has come. And so, yeah.
You know, it's really interesting for people who don't know, you play the younger Korey and the older Korey, whereas all the other actors play the different versions of them. And that's because Korey was slightly older, and I think that the production was able to pull that off. But you know what's really quite interesting is a lot of people don't realize that at first. I didn't. I kept thinking, now who's the guy playing the older Korey? Because the great casting, they look so similar. And it just goes to show how transformative you are in this role. Like, you are just so transformative. You swing back and forth between younger Korey and older Korey. They're so different as people. How difficult is that to play the two versions of him?
First of all, thank you very much. Very difficult. The most challenging thing I probably have ever had to do was play Korey Wise, and was to portray him. It was a multi-step process. You know, it took going back into the acting class, you know, back into the idea of, you know, back to the fundamentals and the technique. Sometimes I feel like the issue that I may have, or the issue that I worry I might have, is that I get too used to it and I'm kind of just doing the same tricks and the same sort of things. And I never want to fall into that. I want to fall into the process of building a character. And so for Korey, it was a multiple step process. It started with the voice. I did vocal lessons for 2 months, and it was just getting that voice, because if you hear it, if you listen to his voice, it's very unique. You know, you kind of never heard a voice like it. And so I think mastering that and figuring that out was the start for me, in terms of embodying him, because that naturally led down into my body and how he walked and how he moved. I think a lot of his voice is his power, and a lot of his voice is what's the strongest part about him. So once that came about, it just fell into the body. And yeah, I had to find the difference between who he was as a young person before incarceration and who he was after. And I think the hardest part was finding who he was before, the young part, because, you know, you can look online all over all over YouTube or online or anywhere, and you won't find him hanging out, you know, with his friends. You won't find him being cool at 16 or 15 or laughing or any of that. You'll just see him behind a desk, timid and scared, answering questions, you know, to police officers. And so it was about finding that youth in him and who he was. I channeled some of who I was. I channeled some of my friends. You know, I'm from the Bronx, like I said. And so I know that there's people who I grew up with that were just like Korey, you know, Raymond, Kevin, all of them. And so I channeled some of that, but it was mainly actually about spending time with him today. I really think that 16-year-old boy is still inside him, you know, beating his drum and living his youth. He's so full of life and so full of youth. He's always talking about the latest hip hop song, or he's talking about, you know, 90s music or just things that he missed. You know, he's talking about the things that he missed while he was in there. And that makes me believe that he still has that kid in him. And so spending that time with him today is how I found that youth and how I found that swag and that charm that he does still have. Because if he still has it now, I can't even imagine what it must have been before the system tried to strip him of it. So, yeah, and then playing older Korey was an extreme challenge. I'm extremely blessed to be cast as older Korey, and Ava saw something in me to where I could do both. And she pushed me very hard to make sure that I did transform. And it wasn't just in terms of the acting, it was physically. I worked out for like a long time. Like it was like 6 days a week, twice a day. I was eating 3,500 calories a day and stuff like that. I'm not a person who works out. I'm really not. So you really have to start paying me or something, I guess, to really put me in a gym. So I ended up really focusing and working with trainers and working out. There was no way I could have gotten to a massive amount the way that Korey looks now, especially, you know, it's 12 years against 4 weeks of working out. But I gained 8.5 pounds of muscle, and I ended up coming back with just a slightly different physique. And so while they shot part 3, pretty much, Korey doesn't appear in part 3. So while they shot part 3, I was in the gym every day, all day. And I pushed myself mainly by thinking about Korey. I mean, if Korey can go through 12 years of false imprisonment, I can go through 4 weeks of lifting and everything. So I channeled that Korey Wise spirit, and I pushed through. And by the time we came back to shoot the older parts, I looked bigger. I had my beard grown in because I look way different. I'm like, however old you think I am now, but if I shave, I'm like 12, 13 years old. So major difference. So yeah, we just used that to our advantage. And it also was playing older Korey. It also took lowering the resonance in the voice, and simple things like not opening my eyes as wide as I did as young Korey. And those bright eyes, to me, they show naivety, they show youth, they show fear and worry. And when your eyes are wide, I feel like it's more shock. And over time, I know those eyes got lower and lower, less shock, less confusion, and more I'm settling into this. This is my life now, and this is who I am. And they're tired now. Those eyes are extremely tired. So I wanted to make sure that over time, as we were shooting older Korey, I felt that exhaustion. There's no way I could ever be Korey Wise. I may have played him and I may have embodied him, but I won't ever be him. I won't ever fill his shoes. No one ever will. So I kept that in mind, and I made sure that I did my best. And so, yeah.
See, a lot of that obviously wouldn't occur to the audience. We are just so swept up in the moment, and it's so interesting to hear your process because it all makes sense when you explain it. And I think this is so typical of Ava DuVernay's work. Every single thing she brings out, I just think, wow, she's just done it again. Like, she keeps getting better and better. She's going to be a legend when she's like a really, really old lady, but for now, she's just killing it. What do you think about working with her, right?
What's that?
What do you think about working with her? I mean, is she as good as she appears on screen?
Yes, absolutely. She is everything you'd imagine and more. You know, to me, she's more than a director. She was a mentor. She was a teacher. And that was my biggest fear. I say this all the time. My biggest fear is that I stepped out of school to jump into the career and to get as blessed as I did and to continue to work up. So my biggest fear was that I would just lose the fundamentals, you know, lose that professor knowledge and lose that one-on-one teaching, working with a scene partner and doing things and stuff like that. That's exactly what it was working with Ava. You know, she was a professor in a master class. She was so insightful, and she teaches you while she does, you know. I had a very hard time shaking off a lot of the scenes after cut. They'd call cut and I would be crying uncontrollably, shaking sometimes, not understanding how I even feel. That's what it was. It was me being in shock with feeling so hurt for Korey, but hurt for myself because I'm in this situation, even though I know I wasn't. It was a lot in my mind, and all I could do was really cry about it towards the end of the takes. And so Ava would do one simple thing, and that's just put her hand on my shoulder. She wouldn't say a word, and she wouldn't say anything besides just be there to comfort me. And she would hold on to me. And after a couple minutes of me breathing, she'd say, "Whenever you're ready, we'll go again." And that's how we worked for a long time, especially for the solitary confinement scenes, especially for the scenes where I was yelling by myself and slamming on the door and banging on the door. And I needed those moments. And I never asked for them. I never, ever asked for them. She just knew when and when not to. And that's the kind of person she is. You know, it becomes more than her job. It becomes more than her work. She cares for people. she had a crisis hotline on set. I don't know if you knew that, and I've never experienced that, but she had somebody you can call if you felt like you couldn't handle it, or if you felt like the weight was too heavy. This is this is a true story. These aren't made up words or made up events, so it really hits very hard for those on set and for those trying to embody these characters. So she had a line you can call and things like that, and so that to me proves the exact type of leader she is, and she's fearless, and she knows exactly what she wants. And I pray to God I work with her again, or if it's not, I pray to God that our relationship remains as strong as it is now, and that it's fruitful and very long.
It's so interesting that you explain the personal toll that that shooting this series took on you, because even as a viewer and so far removed, especially after episode 4, it did take a little while for that to settle, because it was so difficult to watch and so moving. People are now talking about episode 4 and your performance, and there's a lot of talk about awards, which is really lovely. You go on Twitter and you just see that you're trending and people are obsessed with how wonderful you were. How does that feel to get that kind of feedback?
I don't know. It's unreal. It just it makes me speechless all the time. It feels like it happened overnight, even though I know it was a process and it was a lot of hard work. But it really just, in the snap of a finger, I suddenly was an inspiration to many people. And that is a gift, and that is the biggest award I can receive for this. No matter what happens in the future, no matter what will come, I won all the awards in my book. I really did. Every time I look in my messages, wherever it is, Instagram, I text, anything, I smile so big, because it's people who are not only saying great job or it was a great show, but you have inspired me and you have changed me and you have made me feel something. I saw a DM the other day and a guy was like, you reminded me of what acting feels like and what acting is. And that hit me in so many levels. And those messages and those responses, they're hard to grasp. They're hard to understand that it's me they're talking about. Sometimes I'm like, looking behind me, like, you mean the guy behind me? But yeah, it's happening, and I'm just trying to hold on tight, keep my feet on the ground, remember who I am and who my family is, and remain focused and keep it all here and not here. That's my biggest goal, and I'm gonna fight as hard as I can to keep it like that, man.
Yeah, that's a pretty good idea. Jharrel, I really appreciate you making the time on a Sunday afternoon for us, and good luck at all the awards, and thank you for your performance.
Thank you so much, Robert. I appreciate the time.
No worries. Everybody, if you love when they see us, you need to go onto Gold Derby, predict it for all the awards, and then you can come back and subscribe, because we've got lots of videos with amazing contenders just like Jharrel.